The alarm screamed through the medical bay of the hospital ship Mercy's Hand. Dr. Lisa Brooks dropped her coffee and ran to the main console. The red lights flashed across her tired face as she read the emergency message. Kepler 442c mining colony. Under attack. Mass casualties. Medical evacuation needed immediately. Lisa had seen these calls before. In her 10 years working in space, she had saved thousands of lives from dozens of different alien species. The mining colonies were always dangerous places. Cave-ins, equipment failures, toxic gas leaks, they all happened regularly in the outer systems. "Jake, we need to move fast," she called to Commander Jake Turner, who was already checking his weapons in the security station. Jake nodded and spoke into his radio. "All security teams to stations. We have a hot zone evacuation." The Mercy's Hand was not just a hospital ship. It carried 20 of Earth's best doctors and nurses, along with medical equipment that could save lives other species thought were beyond help. But space was dangerous, so Jake's security team always traveled with them. Dr. Kevin Walsh hurried into the medical bay, pulling on his surgical gloves. "How bad is it, Lisa?" "Unknown." The message just said mass casualties. Could be anything, from a mine collapse to a reactor leak. Kevin had been Lisa's friend since medical school. They had worked together on dozens of missions across the galaxy. He was the best trauma surgeon she knew, and she trusted him with the worst cases. Lieutenant Amy Foster's voice came over the ship's speakers. "Approaching Kepler 442c. Colony is not responding to normal communications. Only emergency beacon is active." Lisa felt a cold worry in her stomach. Mining colonies always had people talking on the radio. Miners, supervisors, family members, someone was always chatting. Complete radio silence was never a good sign. "Take us in, Amy. But keep the engines ready for a quick exit." The Mercy's Hand dropped through the thin atmosphere of Kepler 442c. The mining colony sat in a deep valley between red mountains. From above, Lisa could see the main buildings, the processing plants, and the entrance to the underground mines. She could also see bodies. "Jake, are you seeing this?" Jake studied the security monitors with hard eyes. "Yeah, this wasn't an accident." The bodies were scattered around the colony's medical center. Lisa counted at least 30 people lying in the open areas. But what made her blood run cold was how they were positioned. The bodies formed a clear pattern. They had all been trying to reach the medical building when they died. "Someone was hunting them," Jake said quietly. Driving them toward the medical center, the Mercy's Hand landed in the colony's main courtyard. Jake's security team moved out first, checking for threats. Lisa watched through the ship's cameras as Jake and his soldiers examined the scene. "It's clear," Jake's voice crackled over the radio. "But Lisa, you need to see this." Lisa, Kevin, and 3 nurses left the ship wearing their medical gear. The scene was worse up close. The colonists were not just dead. They had been killed with precision. Single shots to vital areas. No wasted ammunition. But the strangest thing was what Lisa found inside the medical center. The building had been completely destroyed from the inside. Medical equipment was smashed. Medicine was poured on the floors. Computer systems were burned. But the attackers had taken time to do this carefully. This was not random destruction. They knew exactly what they were destroying, Kevin said, looking at the remains of a surgical robot. This was targeted. Amy's voice came through their radios. "Lisa, I'm picking up movement in the mines. Survivors." The team moved quickly to the mine entrance. Lisa could hear voices echoing from deep underground. People were calling for help. "In the common galactic language, we're going down," Lisa told Jake. "Negative, this could be a trap. There are injured people down there, that's why we're here." Jake looked at his soldiers, then at Lisa. He knew there was no point in arguing. Human medics had a reputation across the galaxy for going into impossible situations to save lives. It was what made them famous and sometimes what got them killed. The mine tunnels were dark and narrow. Lisa's team followed the sounds of voices deeper underground. The air smelled of dust and fear. They found 43 survivors huddled in a storage chamber. Miners from 6 different species plus their families. Many were injured, all were terrified. The raiders came at dawn, explained Korath, a reptilian mining supervisor. They ignored our valuables, our equipment, our ore. They only wanted to kill people. But the strange thing was how they asked about human medics. Lisa felt ice in her veins. What did they ask? They wanted to know if humans had visited our colony, if we had human medical equipment, if we expected human doctors to come help us. Kevin looked at Lisa with worried eyes. They were hunting us specifically. But why? Asked Amy. Korath's large eyes blinked slowly. They said humans make other species weak. They said human medicine prevents natural selection. They said they were going to eliminate human medics from this sector of space. The ground above them suddenly shook with explosions. Jake's voice screamed through their radios. They're back. Unknown ships attacking the Mercy's Hand. We're taking heavy fire. Lisa made a decision that would change everything. Kevin, get these people ready to move. Amy, find us another way out. I'm going back to help Jake. Lisa, no, it's too dangerous. But Lisa was already running through the tunnels. Behind her, she could hear Kevin organizing the evacuation of the survivors. She reached the mine entrance just as the second wave of explosions hit. The Mercy's Hand was surrounded by 6 attack ships. They were not trying to capture the hospital ship. They were trying to destroy it completely. Lisa watched Jake and his soldiers fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. She saw 2 of her nurses fall as they tried to reach wounded security personnel. Then she saw something that made her understand the true scope of what was happening. The attack ships were not randomly firing. They were specifically targeting anyone wearing medical symbols, the red crosses on the nurses' uniforms, the medical equipment, even the hospital markings on the Mercy's Hand. This was not a robbery. This was not a territorial dispute. This was genocide against human medics. Jake's voice came through her radio one last time. Lisa, get out of here, get back to Earth, tell them what happened. Tell them they're hunting our doctors. The explosion stopped. The attack ships landed. Lisa watched from the mine entrance as armored figures moved through the wreckage. They were checking bodies, making sure all the medics were dead. She had to get the survivors to safety. She had to get word back to Earth. But most importantly, she had to understand why someone would declare war on the people who saved lives across the galaxy. Deep in the mines of Kepler 442c, as she helped 43 aliens escape through forgotten tunnels, Dr. Lisa Brooks realized that everything was about to change. The galaxy's healers had become targets, and humanity would not accept that quietly. Admiral Susan Clark stood in the command center of Earth's military headquarters, staring at the holographic display. Red dots marked every location where human medical teams had been attacked in the last 2 weeks. There were 47 red dots scattered across 12 star systems. It's not random, she said to the officers gathered around the table. Look at the pattern. Captain Rick Stone pointed to the display. They're hitting our medical stations in a specific order, starting with the outer colonies and working inward toward Earth. Dr. Nathan Gray, Earth's top alien warfare expert, nodded grimly. I've been studying the attack methods. Each raid uses the same tactics. They ignore valuable cargo, military targets, even civilian populations. They only target medical personnel and equipment. Susan had seen many wars in her 30 years of military service, but she had never seen anything like this. Wars were fought for territory, resources, or political power. This was something different. This was extermination. How many have we lost? She asked quietly. Rick checked his datapad. 218 medical personnel confirmed dead, 34 missing, presumed captured, 16 hospital ships destroyed, 23 medical stations abandoned. The numbers hit Susan like physical blows. These were not just statistics. These were Earth's best doctors, nurses, and medical researchers, people who had dedicated their lives to saving others. Admiral, we have an incoming transmission from Dr. Lisa Brooks, announced Lieutenant Danny Webb from the communications station. Put her through. Lisa's face appeared on the main screen. She looked exhausted and afraid, but her voice was steady. Admiral Clark, I'm transmitting everything we recorded at Kepler 442c, but there's something else you need to know. Susan leaned forward. What is it, Doctor? The survivors told me the attackers were asking specific questions. They wanted to know about human medical procedures, our equipment, our treatment methods. This wasn't just an attack, it was intelligence gathering. Nathan Gray stepped closer to the screen. Dr. Brooks, did the attackers identify themselves? Any insignia or symbols? The survivors said they wore armor with a twisted star symbol. They called themselves the Hegemony of Score. Susan felt her blood grow cold. She knew that name from intelligence reports. The Hegemony of Score was a militant alliance of several alien species that believed in what they called natural order. They thought some species were naturally superior to others. Admiral, Rick said urgently, I'm receiving multiple distress calls. Attacks happening right now at Proxima Station, the Centauri Medical Research Facility, and the Vega Colony Hospital. Susan's mind raced. How many medical personnel at those locations? Approximately 300 people total. Dispatch all available ships. Maximum speed. But even as she gave the orders, Susan knew they were too late. The attacks were coordinated, across multiple star systems. By the time Earth ships arrived, the medics would be dead. Over the next 6 hours, the reports came in one by one. Proxima Station, 28 medical personnel killed. Centauri Research Facility, 41, dead, including Dr. Kevin Walsh's daughter who was working on a cure for the Centauri plague. Vega Colony Hospital, 37 dead. Nathan Gray had been analyzing the intelligence all day. Admiral, I've found something disturbing. The hegemony isn't working alone. Explain. These attacks require detailed information about our medical operations, ship schedules, personnel assignments, security protocols. Someone with access to Earth's medical databases is helping them. Susan felt anger building in her chest. Are you saying we have a traitor? Not necessarily a human traitor, but several alien species have representatives in our medical alliance. Some of them have access to sensitive information. Rick's communication console lit up with urgent messages. Admiral, I'm getting reports from our diplomatic channels. The Galactic Council is calling an emergency session. Good. Maybe they'll finally do something to stop this. But Nathan Gray shook his head. I've been monitoring alien communications networks. Some species are supporting the hegemony's actions. They think human medical intervention is unnatural. Susan stared at him. What do you mean? They believe that when humans save the lives of inferior species, we're interfering with evolution. They think disease and death are natural selection, and our medicine is preventing the universe from functioning properly. The command center fell silent. Susan had always known some aliens resented humanity's medical advances. Human doctors could cure diseases that had killed alien populations for centuries. Human surgical techniques could save patients other species considered hopeless. But she had never imagined that resentment could turn into systematic murder. Admiral, Danny Webb called from his station. Priority message from Director Tony Richards. At the Galactic Council. Tony Richards appeared on screen. He was Earth's senior diplomat, a man who had spent decades building relationships with alien governments. But today he looked defeated. Susan, the emergency session was a disaster. Only 6 species voted to condemn the attacks on our medical personnel. 12 species abstained. 5 species openly supported the hegemony's right to defend their sector from cultural interference. Susan felt something break inside her chest. They're calling medical aid cultural interference? The hegemony has been spreading propaganda for months. They claim human medicine is a form of species imperialism. They say we're making weak species dependent on us instead of letting them grow strong through natural selection. Nathan Gray leaned toward the screen. Tony, what about protective measures? Military escorts for our medical ships? The council refused. They said providing military protection for medical personnel would violate the neutrality of medicine. Susan laughed bitterly. Neutrality, while our doctors are being hunted like animals. Rick Stone had been monitoring communications channels. Admiral, I'm receiving a message from Dr. Helen Carter at Earth's Medical Corps headquarters. Dr. Helen Carter was the chief of all Earth's medical operations. She had overseen the training of thousands of doctors and nurses who served across the galaxy. When her face appeared on screen, Susan could see tears in her eyes. "I'm making an announcement in 1 hour," Helen said. "Earth is immediately withdrawing all medical aid from any system that has not formally condemned these attacks." Susan nodded. "It's the right decision, Helen." "Is it? Do you know how many alien lives will be lost without our medical support? The Centauri colonies depend on us for their plague treatments. The mining worlds need our trauma surgeons. The research stations rely on our equipment. Then maybe they should have protected our people when they had the chance." Helen's voice was steady, but sad. "I've already received 47 emergency calls from colonies begging us to reconsider. They're panicking, but I can't send more doctors to be slaughtered." Susan understood the terrible choice Helen was making. Earth's medics had always operated under the principle that they would help anyone who needed it, regardless of politics or species. But that principle had been turned into a weapon against them. "There's something else," Helen continued. "The hegemony just broadcast a message across all public channels. They're claiming responsibility for all the attacks, and they're promising more." The message appeared on the main screen. A figure in dark armor stood before the twisted star symbol of the hegemony of Score. "We are the guardians of natural order," the figure announced. "Humans have poisoned the galaxy with their false compassion. They save the weak and make them dependent. They cure diseases that exist to strengthen species. They interfere with the cosmic plan. We will eliminate every human medic from our territory. Let the weak die, and let the strong survive." Susan stared at the message as it ended. She thought about all the human doctors who had died trying to save alien lives. She thought about the children at Proxima Station who had been killed while their human nurses tried to protect them. "Rick," she said quietly. "Yes, Admiral. Get me General Paul Martinez. Tell him I need to see him immediately." "Ma'am?" Susan looked around the command center at her officers. These were good people who had spent their careers protecting Earth and its allies. But the galaxy had just made it clear that Earth's greatest gift, its medical expertise, was now considered a threat. "If the galaxy won't protect our healers," Susan said, "then we'll have to do it ourselves." Rick Stone understood immediately. "You're talking about military action. I'm talking about survival. The hegemony has declared war on our medical personnel. They've made it clear they intend to kill every human doctor in space, and the Galactic Council won't lift a finger to stop them." Nathan Gray looked worried. "Admiral, if we militarize our medical operations, we'll be accused of proving the hegemony's point about human imperialism." Susan stood up and walked to the holographic display. She looked at all the red dots marking the deaths of Earth's healers. "Dr. Gray," she said, "they're already killing our people. They've already declared us enemies. The only question now is whether we're going to defend ourselves or let them finish the job." She turned to face her officers. "Send word to all human medical personnel in space. They are to cease operations immediately and return to Earth or the nearest human military base, no exceptions." "Admiral," Danny Webb said quietly, "what about the colonies that depend on our medical support?" Susan looked. The great chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so tense. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated sections, while Director Tony Richards stood at the human podium holding a data pad that contained evidence of systematic murder. "Honored delegates," Tony began, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "In the past month, the hegemony of Score has killed over 300 human medical personnel. These were not soldiers. These were doctors, nurses, and researchers whose only crime was saving lives." The chamber remained silent. Tony had expected at least some murmur of sympathy, but the alien delegates sat like statues. "I have here documented evidence of each attack." Tony activated the holographic display in the center of the chamber. Images of destroyed hospitals, murdered medics, and burned medical equipment filled the air. The delegate from Proxima, a tall insect-like being named Clicks, finally spoke. "Director Richards, while these deaths are regrettable, we must consider the larger picture. Human medical intervention has created dependency among weaker species." Tony felt his jaw clench. "Dependency? We're talking about saving lives, Delegate Clicks." "Yes, but whose lives? Should not natural selection determine which individuals and species survive? A cold shock ran through Tony's body. Are you seriously suggesting that sick children should be allowed to die to preserve natural selection? The reptilian delegate from Vega raised his hand. The hegemony's methods are extreme, but their concerns about human medical imperialism have merit. Your species has made itself indispensable to galactic healthcare. This creates an unnatural power imbalance. Tony looked around the chamber in disbelief. He had spent 20 years building relationships with these beings. He had negotiated trade, agreements, settled disputes, and worked to create a peaceful galaxy. Now they were justifying the murder of human doctors. Let me be clear, Tony said, his voice growing harder. Are you saying that providing medical aid is imperialism? The elderly delegate from Centauri, whose own people had been saved from plague by human doctors, spoke quietly. Perhaps it would be better if each species developed its own medical capabilities instead of relying on human expertise. Tony stared at the Centauri delegate. 3 months ago, this same being had thanked Earth for saving 2 million of his people from a deadly disease. Now he was suggesting that dependence on human medicine was wrong. Delegate Moran, Tony said, your people would be extinct without human medical intervention. The plague that hit your colonies last year had a 98% mortality rate. Our doctors developed a cure in 6 weeks. Moran's tentacles writhed uncomfortably. And now my people expect human doctors to solve all their medical problems. They have stopped researching their own treatments. This is not healthy for our species' development. Tony realized with growing horror that the chamber was not going to condemn the attacks. The delegates were finding reasons to justify them. I call for a formal vote, Tony announced. All species in favor of condemning the hegemony's attacks on human medical personnel and providing military protection for Earth's medical missions. The voting began. Tony watched the display board as the results appeared. 6 species voted in favor. The same 6 that had always supported Earth in council sessions. 12 species voted against providing protection. 29 species abstained. Tony felt the galaxy collapse around him. The abstentions were worse than the negative votes. They meant these species wanted to stay neutral while human doctors were murdered. The council president, a floating jellyfish-like creature from the Andromeda sector, spoke in its translated mechanical voice. The motion fails. The Galactic Council will not provide military protection for human medical operations. Tony gathered his documents with shaking hands. Then let me make Earth's position clear. As of this moment, all human medical aid to non-allied systems is suspended. Any species that abstained from this vote will receive no further medical assistance from Earth. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Delegates who had just abstained from protecting human doctors were now shouting protests about losing medical support. Director Richards, you cannot be serious, called the delegate from the mining worlds. Our trauma centers depend on human medical technology. Then you should have protected the humans who operate that technology. Tony left the chamber as chaos broke out behind him. Within minutes, his communication device was flooded with emergency calls from colonies, research stations, and planetary governments. Back on Earth, General Paul Martinez sat in a secure conference room with Admiral Susan Clark and Dr. Helen Carter. The reports from the Galactic Council session had reached them an hour ago. So they won't protect our people, Paul said. It was not a question. Helen nodded grimly. 43 emergency medical requests have come in since Tony's announcement. The Rigel system is reporting an outbreak of hemorrhagic fever. The Tau Ceti colonies have had 3 major industrial accidents. The research station at Wolf 359 has a reactor leak with radiation casualties. And? Paul asked. And they're all begging for human medical teams. But I can't send doctors into systems that won't protect them. Susan looked at the intelligence. Reports spread across the table. The hegemony has accelerated their operations. They attacked 4 more medical facilities while the council was debating. They know the galaxy won't stop them. Paul Martinez had been a soldier for 35 years. He had fought in border conflicts, pirate raids, and resource wars. But he had never faced an enemy that specifically targeted medics. Helen, he said, How many human medical personnel do we have in space right now? About 800. Most are returning to Earth as ordered, but some are refusing to leave their patients. They'll be killed, Susan said bluntly. I know. But you can't order a human doctor to abandon dying patients. It goes against everything we are. Paul understood. Earth's medical culture was unique in the galaxy. Other species practiced medicine as a profession. For humans, it was a calling. Human doctors would risk their own lives to save complete strangers, even enemies. That dedication had made them famous across the galaxy. It had also made them targets. General, Susan said, I have a proposal. Paul looked at her. I'm listening. The Galactic Council says providing military protection for medical personnel would violate medical neutrality. But what if we didn't call it military protection? What would we call it? Medical security. A new branch of Earth's medical service. Personnel trained in both combat and healthcare. Helen leaned forward. You're talking about armed medics. I'm talking about medics who can defend themselves and their patients. The galaxy wants to hunt our doctors? Fine. But they're going to discover that human doctors are harder to kill than they thought. Paul considered the idea. It would require completely restructuring Earth's medical operations. But the alternative was watching their medical personnel get slaughtered while the galaxy looked the other way. It would be a massive change, he said. We'd be militarizing medicine. No, Susan replied. We'd be making sure medicine survives. Dr. Helen Carter spoke quietly. I've been thinking about this since the attack started. Maybe the galaxy is right about one thing, maybe we have been too soft. Paul and Susan looked at her in surprise. Helen Carter was known for her compassion and dedication to peaceful medicine. Helen, Paul prompted. For 50 years we've provided medical aid with no conditions, no requirements, no protection for our people. We believed that saving lives was always the right thing to do. But what good are our principles if they get our doctors killed? She stood up and walked to the window overlooking Earth's sprawling medical complexes. I've made a decision. Any human medical mission that leaves Earth from now on will include security personnel, armed security personnel. If the galaxy has a problem with that, they can solve their own medical emergencies. Paul nodded slowly. What about the colonies that are begging for help? The fever outbreak at Rigel? They can send formal requests for military protection. If they want human doctors, they can guarantee human safety. Susan smiled grimly. And if they can't guarantee safety? Helen turned from the window. For the first time since Paul had known her, the gentle doctor looked truly angry. Then they can watch their people die and remember that they chose politics over medicine. 3 hours later, the news broke across the galaxy. Earth was establishing a new military medical division. Human doctors would continue to provide aid, but only under armed protection. Any system requesting medical assistance would be required to provide formal security guarantees. The response was immediate and panicked. 17 colonies sent emergency diplomatic messages accepting the conditions. The Rigel system formally requested both medical aid and military protection for human personnel. But the hegemony of SCORE also responded. Their message was broadcast on all channels. Humans reveal their true nature. They use medicine as a weapon to control the galaxy. Now they send soldiers disguised as doctors. We will destroy every human who enters our territory, whether they carry medical supplies or military weapons. In his office on Earth, General Paul Martinez read the hegemony's threat and smiled coldly. For weeks, they had been hunting human doctors who couldn't fight back. Now they would discover what happened when they hunted humans who could fight back. Admiral Clark, he said into his communicator. Colonel Danny Webb stood on the deck of the UES Hippocrates, watching his team prepare for their first mission. The ship looked like a normal hospital vessel from the outside, but inside it carried some of Earth's deadliest soldiers alongside, its medical staff. Danny had volunteered for the Medical Protection Division after his sister died in the Proxima Station massacre. She had been a pediatric nurse, killed while trying to evacuate sick children. The hegemony soldiers had shot her 3 times in the back as she carried a wounded alien child to safety. Colonel, we're approaching the Vega system. announced Major Sarah King from the bridge. Sarah was a former Special Forces operative who had lost her entire unit in a hegemony ambush 2 months ago. She had survived only because she was off duty, visiting her boyfriend at a medical station that was attacked. The same day, status report, Danny ordered. The mining colony on Vega 7 reported a reactor leak 12 hours ago. Estimated 70 casualties, mostly radiation poisoning. They formally requested medical assistance under the new protection protocols. Danny nodded. This would be the first test of Earth's new doctrine. Human doctors would provide medical aid, but they would be protected by soldiers who had one simple mission: eliminate any threat to medical personnel. Dr. Marcus Bell joined Danny on the observation deck. Marcus was one of the few survivors from the Titan Research Station massacre. He had watched his colleagues die while trying to save alien patients. Now he had volunteered to work with the Medical Protection Division. "How do you feel about going back into the field, Doc?" Danny asked. Marcus looked out at the stars. Scared, but more angry than scared. Those people on Vega 7 need help, and I'm not going to let the hegemony stop me from saving them. Good. Because if the hegemony shows up, we're going to show them what happens when they hunt human medics. The Hippocrates dropped out of hyperspace near Vega 7. The mining colony was a small settlement built around a massive fusion reactor that powered the entire system's industrial operations, but now the reactor was leaking deadly radiation. "Colonel," called Lieutenant Mike Johnson from the weapons station. "I'm detecting 6 ships in the outer system. Configuration matches hegemony attack vessels." Danny felt his blood turn cold. "They're already here." Sarah King's voice was steady. "Should we request backup?" "Negative. We knew this might happen. The hegemony has been monitoring emergency medical calls, using them to set traps for our people." Danny activated the ship's communication system. "All hands, this is Colonel Webb. We have hostile contacts in the system. Medical teams prepare for emergency evacuation procedures. Combat teams prepare for engagement. Remember, our mission is to protect the medics and complete the medical mission." The Hippocrates approached Vega 7 under full scanner sweep. The mining colony was in chaos. Radiation alarms were screaming across all frequencies. The fusion reactor's containment field was failing, and without immediate medical attention, everyone in the colony would die within hours. "Danny," Marcus said quietly, "there are 400 people down there. Men, women, children from 6 different species. If we don't get them medical treatment now, they'll all be dead by tomorrow. Then we better make sure the hegemony doesn't stop us." The Hippocrates landed in the colony's main courtyard. Danny's security teams deployed immediately, establishing a defensive perimeter around the medical personnel. Dr. Marcus Bell and his team rushed toward the colony's medical center, carrying equipment that could treat radiation poisoning. For 30 minutes, the work proceeded smoothly. Marcus and his team stabilized the worst cases and began treatment procedures. The radiation levels were dropping as the reactor's emergency systems finally engaged. Then the hegemony attacked. 6 ships dropped out of hyperspace directly above the colony. Instead of targeting the Hippocrates or the industrial facilities, they focused their fire on the medical center where Marcus was working. "They're doing it again," Sarah King said over the radio. "Targeting the medics specifically." Danny had been waiting for this moment for weeks. "All combat teams engage the enemy. Protect the medical personnel at all costs." The battle was unlike anything the hegemony had experienced before. Instead of defenseless doctors and nurses, they found themselves facing Earth's elite soldiers, who had trained specifically to protect medical operations. Lieutenant Mike Johnson led his demolitions team in a flanking attack on the hegemony ground forces. The enemy soldiers were equipped for killing unarmed medics, not fighting professional soldiers. "Target down," Mike reported, as his team eliminated a hegemony squad that was trying to breach the medical center. "These guys are good at murdering doctors, but they're not real soldiers." Major Sarah King coordinated the defense from the Hippocrates. Her tactical experience allowed her to predict the hegemony's movements and counter them before they could reach the medical teams. "Danny, they're trying to surround the medical center," she reported. "But they're using the same tactics they used against defenseless medics. They have no idea how to fight against organized resistance. The battle lasted only 18 minutes. When it was over, 43 hegemony soldiers were dead. The human medical teams had not lost a single person. Danny walked through the aftermath, checking on his people. The hegemony had made a crucial mistake. They had assumed that all humans were as vulnerable as the medics they had been killing. They had not prepared to fight soldiers who were trained to kill. "Colonel Webb," Marcus called from the medical center, "we've stabilized all the casualties. The reactor leak is contained. Everyone is going to survive." Danny smiled grimly. "Good work, Doc. How do you feel?" "Different. For the first time since the Titan massacre, I feel safe doing my job." The news of the Vega 7 battle spread across the galaxy within hours. The hegemony had suffered their first major defeat. More importantly, they had learned that human medical operations were no longer defenseless. On the hegemony flagship, Commander Vorthak studied the battle reports with growing concern. For months, his forces had been successfully eliminating human medics. The operations had been simple: locate medical facilities, eliminate personnel, destroy equipment. But now the humans had changed the game. Their medical teams were protected by soldiers who fought with ruthless efficiency. The attack on Vega 7 had been a disaster. "Commander," his aide reported, "we're receiving reports from across the sector. Human medical teams are operating under armed protection. Our forces are taking heavy casualties." Vorthak growled in frustration. "How many of our ships have we lost?" 12 attack vessels in the past week, plus over 300 ground troops. The hegemony had been effective at killing defenseless humans, but they were discovering that armed humans were far more dangerous than they had anticipated. "Sir, we have another problem. The colonies we've been trying to liberate from human medical dependence are now requesting Earth's new protected medical services. They're offering to pay for military protection if it means getting human doctors." Vorthak realized that their campaign was backfiring. Instead of eliminating human medical influence, they were forcing humanity to militarize their medical operations. And militarized humans were proving to be far more dangerous than peaceful ones. Back on Earth, General Paul Martinez reviewed the mission reports with satisfaction. The Medical Protection Division had conducted 15 successful operations in the past month. Human medical teams were saving lives across the galaxy, and the hegemony was learning that attacking them came with a deadly price. "General," Admiral Susan Clark reported, "we're receiving formal requests for medical assistance from 37 systems. All are willing to provide security guarantees and accept our military protection protocols." "Good. And the hegemony?" "They've stopped attacking our medical facilities directly. Instead, they're trying to prevent colonies from requesting our help, but that's not working either. Too many systems need our medical expertise." Paul nodded. The strategy was working. By protecting their medics with elite soldiers, humanity had not only saved lives but had also demonstrated their military capabilities to the galaxy. "There's something else," Susan continued. "Intelligence reports suggest the hegemony is planning a major offensive. They're massing forces for an attack on Earth's medical training facilities." Paul's expression hardened. "They want to hit us at home." "It appears so. They think if they can destroy our medical infrastructure on Earth, they can end our ability to provide galactic medical services." Paul thought about the thousands of human doctors and nurses who were training on Earth. The hegemony had made a fundamental error in their understanding of humanity. They thought humans were either helpless medics or dangerous soldiers. They had not considered that humans could be both. "Susan, prepare the defense of Earth's medical facilities, but don't use standard military units." "Sir, use Medical Protection Division personnel. Let the hegemony learn what happens when they threaten human medics on their home world." Lydie looked out at Earth's medical complexes, where thousands of doctors and nurses were training to save lives across the galaxy. The hegemony had declared war on humanity's greatest strength. Now they would discover that humanity's greatest strength was also the source of their most ruthless determination. The galaxy had wanted to see what humans would do when their healers were threatened. President Linda Hayes stood in the Oval Office, watching the news reports from across the galaxy. For the first time in months, Human medical teams were operating safely in dozens of star systems. But the cost of that safety was becoming clear. "Madam President," General Paul Martinez said as he entered the room. "The Hegemony fleet has been spotted approaching Earth. Intelligence estimates 200 ships." Linda nodded calmly. She had been expecting this. The Hegemony's campaign against human medics had failed completely. Instead of eliminating Earth's medical influence, they had forced humanity to create the most effective military medical force the galaxy had ever seen. "How long until they arrive?" 6 hours. They're targeting Luna Medical Complex and the training facilities in Earth orbit. Linda looked out at Earth's sprawling medical infrastructure. Thousands of doctors and nurses were training there, preparing to save lives across the galaxy. The Hegemony wanted to destroy humanity's ability to heal. "General, are our defenses ready?" "Yes, ma'am. Fleet Admiral Chris Morgan is commanding the defense." "But Linda, there's something you need to understand. If we defeat this attack, it won't be a defensive victory." Linda understood. Earth's response to the Hegemony's aggression had already changed humanity's role in the galaxy. They were no longer just healers. They had become protectors, and protectors sometimes had to destroy to preserve life. "The galaxy needs to see what happens when human medics are threatened," she said quietly. "Yes, ma'am. But once we show them, there's no going back. We'll never again be seen as just peaceful doctors." Linda thought about all the human medics who had died in the past months. Dr. Kevin Walsh, who had sacrificed himself to save alien colonists. The nurses at Proxima Station who had died protecting sick children. Her own nephew, a young surgeon killed while treating Hegemony prisoners of war. "General, the galaxy made this choice when they decided our healers were acceptable targets. Now they'll live with the consequences." 6 hours later, the Hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Earth. Commander Vorthak expected to find a peaceful world protected by standard military forces. Instead, he discovered that Earth's defenses were commanded by the same people who had been protecting human medics across the galaxy. Fleet Admiral Chris Morgan watched the enemy fleet approach from the bridge of the UES Asclepius, a medical ship that had been converted into a command vessel. His fleet was smaller than the Hegemony force, but every ship was crewed by personnel who had one driving motivation: protecting human medical operations. "Admiral," reported Captain Lisa Brooks, who had survived the original Kepler 442c massacre and now commanded a hospital ship equipped with military weapons. "The enemy is deploying in standard attack formation. They're targeting our medical facilities first." Chris smiled coldly. "Of course they are. That's all they know how to do." The battle began with the Hegemony focusing their fire on Luna Medical Complex, the largest medical training facility in human space. But instead of finding defenseless doctors and students, they encountered defensive systems operated by Medical Protection Division personnel. Colonel Danny Webb coordinated the defense. From Luna's surface, his teams had spent weeks preparing for this attack, turning the medical complex into a fortress that could protect thousands of medical students while eliminating any threats. "They're using the same tactics they used against our medical stations," Danny reported to Admiral Morgan. "But our people aren't running scared anymore." The Hegemony had made a fundamental error. They had studied how to attack defenseless medical facilities, but they had never learned how to fight humans who were defending their right to heal. Major Sarah King led a counterattack that destroyed 6 Hegemony ships in the first hour of battle. "Admiral, the enemy is confused. They expected us to prioritize protecting our medical facilities over fighting back. They don't understand that we're doing both." Lieutenant Mike Johnson's demolitions teams had mined the space around Earth's medical installations. When Hegemony ships tried to approach the hospitals and training centers, they found themselves trapped in fields of explosives operated by soldiers who had watched their medical colleagues die. "Target destroyed," Mike reported as another Hegemony vessel exploded. "These guys still think they're hunting defenseless doctors. They have no idea they're fighting people who've been waiting months for revenge." The battle lasted 8 hours. When it ended, the Hegemony fleet was completely destroyed. Not a single Hegemony ship escaped. More importantly, not a single human medical facility was damaged. Commander Vorthak died when his flagship was destroyed by a coordinated attack from 3 hospital ships that had been converted into warships. His last transmission was a confused report about humans who fought like demons while healing the wounded. The news of Earth's victory spread across the galaxy within hours. But Admiral Morgan was not finished. He had promised the galaxy that attacking human medics would have consequences. "All ships prepare for pursuit operations," he ordered. "Sir?" Captain Brooks asked. "The hegemony came from somewhere. They have bases, supply depots, command centers. I want them all eliminated." The pursuit lasted 3 weeks. Human fleets followed. The hegemonies trailed back through 4-star systems, systematically destroying every military installation they found. But they did something else that shocked the galaxy. At every hegemony base they captured, human medical teams immediately began treating wounded enemy personnel. Dr. Marcus Bell personally saved the life of a hegemony officer who had participated in the Titan massacre. "Why are you helping me?" the officer asked. Marcus looked down at the alien who had helped kill his colleagues. "Because I'm a doctor. It's what we do." But the hegemony officer also noticed the armed guards standing beside the medical bed. Human soldiers who watched every movement, ready to eliminate any threat to the medical personnel. The message was clear. Humans would heal anyone who came to them in peace, but they would destroy anyone who threatened their ability to heal. 3. Months after the Battle of Earth, President Linda Hayes addressed the reformed Galactic Council. The chamber was much more respectful than it had been during the crisis. "For 50 years, Linda said, humanity provided medical aid freely to anyone who needed it. We asked for nothing in return except the safety of our medical personnel. When that safety was threatened, we were forced to change." The alien delegates listened in silence. Many of their worlds had benefited from the new human medical doctrine. Colonies that had requested protected medical services had received the best healthcare in galactic history. "Today I am announcing the Terran Medical Protection Accords," Linda continued. "Any world that formally guarantees the safety of human medical personnel will receive full medical support. Any world that threatens human medics will be treated as an enemy of Earth." The vote was unanimous. Every species in the galaxy agreed to the accords. Director Tony Richards, now Earth's senior diplomatic representative, watched the vote with satisfaction. "Madam President, how does it feel to have the unanimous support of the Galactic Council?" Linda looked out at the alien delegates who had once refused to protect human doctors. "Tony, they're not supporting us because they love us. They're supporting us because they're afraid of us. Is that a problem?" Linda thought about all the human medics who were now working safely across the galaxy, saving lives under the protection of the most feared soldiers in known space. "No," she said. "Fear keeps our people alive, and alive doctors can save lives." 6 months later, Dr. Lisa Brooks stood in the medical bay of the UES Hippocrates, treating victims of a mining accident on Rigel 4. Beside her, Colonel Danny Webb monitored the security sensors, watching for any threats. "Lisa," Danny said, "do you ever miss the old days, when we were just healers?" Lisa looked at the alien patients she was treating. Children, adults, elderly beings from 4 different species. All of them would live because human doctors had come to help them. All of them were safe because human soldiers stood ready to kill anyone who threatened the medical mission. "Danny, we're still healers. We're just healers who can't be killed anymore." Outside the medical bay, Lieutenant Mike Johnson and his team patrolled the colony, ensuring that the medical mission could proceed safely. The colonists watched the human soldiers with a mixture of gratitude and fear. The humans would heal anyone who asked for help, but they would also eliminate anyone who threatened their healers. The galaxy had learned a simple lesson. Humanity's greatest strength was their compassion, but their greatest weapon was their willingness to protect that compassion at any cost. In the end, the hegemony of Score had achieved the opposite of their goal. Instead of eliminating human medical influence, they had forced humanity to become the galaxy's most effective protectors of life. The healers had become executioners, and the galaxy was safer because of it. Dr. Marcus Bell finished treating his last patient and prepared to return to Earth. As he walked past the memorial wall listing all the human medics who had died in the hegemony attacks, He paused at his daughter's name. "We won, sweetheart," he whispered. "They can't hurt us anymore." Behind him, Colonel Danny Webb stood guard, ready to kill anyone who might threaten the gentle doctor who had dedicated his life to saving others. The war was over, the healers had survived, and the galaxy would never,